this Kuru, who lived after 1,000 years after Samvarana, after the Shirajana battle, he returned back to his homeland, that is Varaprithviya, and renamed it as Kurukshetra. And Kurukshetra, you have the boundaries like Saraswati in the north and Drishadwadi in the south. A Western religion, that is a Zoroastrian religion, they consider this region as paradise, because as per the Western religion, Yama is actually the king of paradise, and Yama is basically from Yamuna region. The Pandavas were very industrious, and Sri Krishna also much more industrious than them. They have established Dwaraka out of nowhere in the Dwaraka and the Kushasthali region. So he has used that expertise, and the Pandavas, when joined with Krishna, they established Indraprastha. Thanks, Komji, and I thank Neera Mishra ji. So what I'm going to talk about is, because I have authored 3 books. One is on the Rig Veda, rivers of Rig Veda, where I have analyzed around 31 plus rivers in the Rig Veda and identified their current locations. And then as a continuity, I would say, two other books, that is on the geography of Ramayana and geography of Mahabharata. And my finding is that there is definitely a chronological and geographical continuity from the Rig Veda to Ramayana and to the Mahabharata. And I get it very correctly, that because some leftist scholars say Ramayana happened later than the Mahabharata, but I have, when I looked at the chronology and geography, I get Rama is right in the middle between the Rig Vedic and the Kurukshetra war period. So there is absolutely no confusion in the chronology. So we have the Rig Vedic kings like Sudas, like Dr. Elst has detailed, and then we had Sri Rama, and then subsequently we had Yudhishthira and the Pandavas and the Mahabharata. So today I will be talking about Yamuna. Definitely all these text talks about Yamuna. So I will start with Yamuna in the Rig Veda, and then move to Ramayana, and then to the Mahabharata. So that is my 15 minutes talk is all about. So first we get to know about Yamuna. Basically in the Rig Veda. Here actually I have put the Nadi Sukta, which is in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, where as many as 21 rivers in the Rig Veda is already mentioned. So as a researcher on the rivers mentioned in the Rig Veda, 31 plus rivers, it was easy for me to just look at the Nadi Sukta, you have 21 rivers. But then remaining 10 rivers is very hard. You have to look into all the mandalas and all the suktas. So we have 1028 suktas, and then 10,555 1028 suktas and 10,555 verses. So we have to search through all of them, and then you get all the rivers. And the 10th mandala Nadi Sukta, you have it is a very geographical signature. So it's an encoding geography, because the first river is Ganga and the second river is Yamuna, and then it talks about Saraswati, and then Sududri and Vipas, that is Satlaj Bias, then Parushni, that is the Ravi river, my namesake, and then Asikni, that is the Chenab river, and then Vitasta, and then it goes to Sindhu and the tributaries of Sindhu like Upha and Krumu and this Gomati, Anitapha, etc., that Shashiji has mentioned. So we have all these rivers in a kind of geographical sequence, and most importantly, it gives you very clearly that Saraswati is between Yamuna and Satlaj river. So all the kind of nonsense that the Aryan invasion theory says about Saraswati is in Afghanistan, that's absolute nonsense. And here, of course, the Rig Veda's primary focus is on Saraswati, but our conference is on Yamuna, so we will focus mostly on the Yamuna. And of course, in the Nadi Sukta, it appears in the second river after Ganga, because it is to the west of Ganga, basically, because of that. And of course, to the east of Saraswati. So it's rightly, Yamuna is there in between Ganga and Saraswati in the Nadi Sukta. But of course, in the Rig Veda, the Yamuna is mentioned in the early Rig Vedic period itself. I have not focused much on it, because Dr. Elst has already mentioned one of the battles of Sudas that was fought on the Yamuna river. So that is how we get to know Yamuna for the first time in the Rig Veda, the oldest text Rig Veda, the oldest, one of the oldest mandalas, that is in the 7th mandala you have Yamuna mentioned in the one of the battles, the eastern battle of Sudas. And he was trying to expand his territory to the east, like Dr. Elst has mentioned. And he has fought with many kingdoms like Matsya kingdom and Yakshus, and then there is a chief called Bheda. And of course, these Matsyas we came to know later in the Mahabharata. The Satyavati is actually basically from the same Matsya territory on the Yamuna river. It is slightly different from the Matsya in the Virata territory, that is in the Rajasthan. So these Matsyas are connected. There may be migration in between them, but these are the oldest Matsyas who are in the Yamuna Nadi, and the Satyavati being part of that Matsya territory. And that Satyavati became the queen of Hastinapura, and from that Satyavati, Vyasa is born, and he has compiled all the Vedas and everything. So that is how the Yamuna's history is completely connected with the Rig Veda from the earliest mandalas onwards. And finally, she finds a place in the 10th mandala as a second river. And here, what we are seeing is the most important region mentioned in the Rig Veda. Of course, it is just to the west of our Yamuna Nadi. This is the Varaprithviya, the best place in the world. That is how the Rig Veda mentioned it. Of course, later 10,000 years later than the Dasharajana battle, King Kuru, who actually is a descendant of Samvarana, who is basically mentioned as Puru of scornful speech, as an enemy of Sudas in the Dasharajana battle. So this Kuru, who lived after 1,000 years after Samvarana, after the Dasharajana battle, he returned back to his homeland, that is Varaprithviya, and renamed it as Kurukshetra. And Kurukshetra, you have the boundaries like Saraswati in the north and Drashadwadi in the south. And of course, Sanjay ji has mentioned all the important Birana, Rakhi, Garhi, everything is there in the banks of Saraswati and Drashadwadi inside the Kurukshetra. And so that is very, very important place. It has got 4 corners. It is there is 4 yakshas are guarding Kurukshetra from the 4 corners that you can see in the map. And there are 3 important places. The oldest place mentioned in the Rig Veda, one is related to Manu, Manusha. Another is related to Ila, Manu's daughter, that is Ilaspada. And the third one is related to Bharati, who is none other than Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata is known in the Rig Veda as Bharati, and she was the patron goddess of Bharata, King Bharata, who is also happened to be the Rashtrapita of India. And I don't think Mahatma Gandhi qualifies for that. So it is Rashtrapita is King Bharata. And so that is the sacredness of this important place called Kurukshetra. And it is known as Varaprithviya. And as Komji mentioned, even the Avestan religion, that is a Zoroastrian the religion, they consider this region as paradise, because as per the Avestan religion, Yama is actually the king of paradise, and Yama is basically from Yamuna region. Yama and Yami, they were in the Yamuna region, and that the reason why Yamuna is called the daughter of, the sister of Yama is basically because their territory is in that region, basically. This Varaprithviya have a rectangular shape, and it is called 4-cornered Kurukshetra in the Mahabharata. Exactly same thing in the Zoroastrian text Vendidat. It is called Varena, which is 4-cornered. So we have a correspondence from the Zoroastrian text Vendidat as Varena, which is, they mentioned it one of the 16 lands of the Ahuras. That is, the Zoroastrian call themselves as the Ahuras. Of course, their pronunciation is Ahura, but we call them Asura. So they have one of the homeland as the Varena, which is identical to the Varaprithviya in the Rig Veda and identical to the Kurukshetra. So this is all the same place they are talking about. And this is a close-up of the same Manusha region, and it is very close to the city of Kaithal. And many of you are in Haryana, definitely have to go to visit Kaithal, because this is some of the oldest places in the Bharatavarsha, in the oldest text of humanity, that is Rig Veda. It is mentioned Manusha related to Manu, and Ilaspada related to Ila. They are mentioned very close to the Kaithal. And there is a river named Aapaya, which was actually a former earlier course of the river Saraswati and later turned into a tributary of Saraswati. So it has a dual role. Aapaya was the older course of Saraswati. So that is why when Manu was living, Manu had established his settlement along Manusha, and his daughter Ila happened to be in the Ilaspada. And of course, their relative, Ikshvaku, is considered to be somewhere near to the Manusha and Ilaspada, but we didn't get the location where Ikshvaku lived. So that is about river Aapaya, which was a central river in the Kurukshetra. And of course, it is slightly hindered in the Kurukshetra war, where it mentioned Arjuna have shot an arrow underground, to the ground. There is water came out of the ground, and it has quenched the thirst of Bhishma. But the Mahabharata poets call it as water from Ganga, but actually it is from the Aapaya river water, because the Aapaya river was there in that same location of Kurukshetra where Bhishma fell. And that underground water will be existing in the place where Bhishma fell. But of course, in the Mahabharata, the Ganga is also called Aapaya. in a general term, because Aapaya can also mean a flow of water. So that is also used for a generic river. So it is applied for other rivers like Ganga and even Chenab river also. Yeah, and this is the kind of territory of Sudas, which can be considered as an ancient Vedic empire. Of course, it is in a continuous expansion. So whatever I'm showing is the earliest stage of the empire between Yamuna Nadi in the east and Parishni River in the west. So basically, his empire was having Haryana, Uttar Pradesh as his eastern border along Yamuna, and India-Pakistan as the Ravi River or the Parishni River as the western border. And of course, he expanded further from these territories. That is why you have Dasharajna battle in the western side when he pushed the other enemies, 10 enemies to the west. And our hero, the Samvarana, that is enemy of Sudas, he fled up to Sindhu river. So these things we can get to read in the Mahabharata. So my books tells you there is a correspondence between Rig Vedic information and the Mahabharata information as well. And you can see the most important places that King Kuru came after 1,000 years after Samvarana, and he renamed the northern region, his homeland, as Varaprithviya into Kurukshetra, and the southern region as Kuru-Panchala. And that is somewhere in the mid-Rig Vedic period, all these things happened. And the Dasharajna happened in the early Rig Vedic period. And now here, this is a map of how this Samvarana, who is a very important hero inside the Mahabharata, is actually corresponding with the Puru of scornful speech mentioned in the early Rig Vedic period. So the Samvarana have had a conflict with the Panchalas, and Panchalas defeated the Samvarana, and he has to flee along with family and children. He has to flee into the westwards towards Sindhu. That is already mentioned in the Mahabharata. And same thing we correspond with the Dasharajna battle, because one of the enemies of Sudas was Puru of scornful speech. And the Samvarana, even though he is basically one of the branch of the Bharatas, just like Sudas is another branch of the Bharatas, the Trutsu lineage. But Samvarana has a special nickname called Paurava. That is mentioned in the Mahabharata. So that is easily correspondable with the terminology Puru, which is mentioned in the Rig Veda as for the enemy of Sudas. So the Samvarana mentioned as Puru and another Anava king named Kavi-Chayamana, they were the primary enemies of Sudas. And along with the other 10, there are total 10 kings who are opposing Sudas. But all of them got defeated and they fled to westwards. And the westward fleeing, he leaving that territory of Parushni and leaving to west, that is recorded in the Mahabharata. And Mahabharata says he stayed in that western territory along Sindhu, and which I discovered to be also the river Sarayu, that is the western Sarayu, which is mentioned in the Rig Veda, also was flowing into the Sindhu river at that particular same location where Samvarana fled. And we get in the Mahabharata that Samvarana married Tapati Vaivaswati, and Vivaswat, surname indicate she was an Ikshvaku. And the people who are ruling in that Sarayu Sindhu region, not to be confused with the Sarayu of Uttar Pradesh, but this is a western Sarayu. So Tapati Vaivaswati, I have identified with the princess in the Trikshi lineage. Trikshi is another term used for Ikshvakus, western Ikshvakus in the Rig Veda. So this is all matching up, and my discovery is that the Kuru, who is the descendant of Samvarana, is a blend of the western Ikshvakus and the Bharata branch of Samvarana branch of the Bharatas. And then he returns back after 1,000 of years after the Dasharajna battle. He returns back and renamed the Varaprithviya's Kurukshetra. And similarly, after some time, Sudas was a great king. He was a great emperor. Everything. After that, Sahadeva and Somaga, two important kings in the Trutsu lineage after Sudas. But after that, their lineage declined. So all these, of course, all these kings, Sudas, Sahadeva, Somaga, all of them are considered as ancestors of Panchalas. So all these great kings in the Rig Veda, they are ancestors of the Panchalas, including Sudas' ancestor Devodasa, Srinjaya, and all the way up to Bharata. So this is a separate lineage that leading to the Panchalas. And later on in the Mahabharata, things become very friendly, because Pandavas marries Panchali. So that enmity, at least from the point of view of Pandavas, ended. But the Duryodhana and other people, they don't accept it. That is why there is a lot of conflict. So they don't accept Panchali because she is basically their enemy princess. So that will come soon. When this Trutsu Panchalas, they got weakened. The Anavas who were being defeated earlier, they came back. They occupied the Varaprithviya. And this is mentioned in the Puranas like Asuras coming and occupying Devaloka. Because you know that in the Western text also, the Haryana northern region is called Swarga or paradise. And the same thing we in the Rig Veda and the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the northern Haryana is considered as the Devaloka. So anybody comes and occupy Devaloka, that is Asuras coming and occupying Devaloka. And Anavas are specifically called Asuras in the Western text. So naturally they were called Asuras. So after these Anavas, but even though these Anavas are enemies to the Sudas, they are actually allies for the Samvarana. So once the Anavas came and occupied the Varaprithviya, then this Tritsu dominance, that is the ancestor of Panchala dominance, ended in the Varaprithviya, and they migrated to Kuru-Panchala basically. So that entire territory became empty. That time the Kuru came. Returned back to Varaprithviya because he is strong there, and he renamed it as Kurukshetra, and the southern region as Kuru-Panchala. The south of as per a definition in the Mahabharata, to the south of Drishadvadi is Kuru-Panchala. So it is basically bordered by Yamuna in the east and Drishadvadi in the north. Yeah, and in the Rig Veda we get another migration. This is like from their north, the stronghold of Kurukshetra or Varaprithviya, they shifted southwards. Towards what is later become Indraprastha. So what I am saying is that even before Panjali became the queen of the Indraprastha, that entire region was actually ruled by their ancestors. That is an intermediate stage you can get in Valmiki Ramayana, very interestingly, because in the Valmiki Ramayana, the Panchalas are located in Kuru-Panchala. Yeah, here you can see in the there is a mention about King the Bharata, Prince Bharata living in Kekaya, and the Vasishta asked messengers to bring Bharata from Kekaya back to Ayodhya because the throne of Ayodhya is empty. Because Sri Rama went to Vanvas, Dasharatha died. So that time there is a travel narrative where it mentioned Panchala actually located in Kuru-Panchala, and this messengers cross the Ganga at Hastinapura, goes to Panchala in Kuru-Panchala, and finally goes to the Kulinga, that is a mountain Himalayan kingdom, and then finally reach Kekaya. And Kekaya capital Girivaraja is identified with the Wagh, city of Wagh in the Pakistan, because it is surrounded by mountains. Girivaraja means surrounded by mountain. So there are two cities by that name, Girivaraja of Kekaya capital Girivaraja, and Girivaraja, that is Magadha capital. Both are surrounded by mountains. And here actually what you can basically see is the continuity of that travel, that they goes to this crossing the river Saraswati, and there is another river named Saradanda, which is mentioned in the Rig Veda Sharapas. So Sharapas and Saradanda, they are both the same name. Today it is known as one of the northern tributary of Ganga, through which the earlier times Satluj joined Saraswati. So that is the Ghaggar river. So of course today archaeologists call the Ganga, this Saraswati stream as Ghaggar stream, but Ghaggar is originally a northern tributary of Saraswati. And through this northern tributary, in very early times, Satluj river flowed into Saraswati as a tributary. So that river is called Saradanda in the Ramayana and Sarapas in the Rig Veda. So these particular messengers travel through Saradanda in their way towards Bahlika and the Kekaya. So that is, and again a comparative analysis of Rig Veda and Ramayana. And then you get the real, the most interesting part, because the earlier capital of the Kurus, basically the capital of Kuru himself, was Asandi, which is a very important archaeologically excavated city inside Kurukshetra. And then from there, there is a migration. Kuru's descendant Pratibha, he migrated eastwards towards Yamuna, and he established the Varanavata, a city very close to Yamuna Nadi. And then this Pratibha's son Shantanu is the correct one who establishing Hastinapura at Ganga. And Shantanu establishing Hastinapura at Ganga is poetically described as Shantanu marrying Ganga. It's a political statement. And because if you look at it in the Mahabharata, you have a spurious king called Hasti, but it is actually a kind of a poetically created king, because there is no history about Hasti, and he is not part of any. There are two lineages inside the Mahabharata. Only the kings who are present in both the lineages can be considered as authentic kings. If it is spuriously mentioned in a single verse, we can't take him. So actually the real establisher of Hastinapura is Shantanu himself, and him establishing Hastinapura at Ganga is a political statement that's saying that Shantanu become the husband of Gangapati. Shantanu became the husband of Ganga. That's a political statement. And later on we have, in a way we can say, for example, there are so many examples, like in the Ramayana, there is a mention of Malyavat, Mali and Sumali, three grandfathers of Ravana. They mention daughters of Narmada. And when we look at, it is basically the Rakshasas establishing themselves on the Narmada Nadi. And there is a Bhagirathas, again, Bhagirathi is Now, Bhagirath actually, when he occupied Ganga Nadi, is given the name of Bhagirathi to the river Ganga. Basically, it's a political statement. And even in the Rig Veda, as Dr. Els mentioned, Vishwamitra went eastwards, defeated Kikadas, and then the Ganga is renamed as Jannavi. And who is Jannavi is a daughter of Jannu. And who is Jannu? Jannu is basically the ancestor of Vishwamitra. So basically, every clan, when they get a hold of Ganga, they make a political statement which is encoded into poetry. Either it put in Rig Veda or in the Ramayana or in the Mahabharata. So this is how we can get. So many such examples are there. So our point here is basically that ultimately when the kingdom was divided between Pandavas and Kauravas, the Dhritarashtra, because he's always not very happy about the Pandavas getting strong because they married Panchali and Panchala became their ally. So this was didn't gone well with the Dhritarashtra or Duryodhan. So what they did, no, you married Panchali, then you go to the same place where Panchalas lived in the Kuru-Jangala. So they sent them. Those send them to that same Kuru-Jangala. It was become a jungle actually. Basically, it became forest, useless, completely not a good kingdom. It was completely gone. So they sent him to that Kuru-Jangala, and the Pandavas were very industrious, and Sri Krishna also much more industrious than them. He has already having the capability. He already have established Dwaraka out of nowhere in the Dwaraka and the Kushasthali region. So he has used that expertise, and the Pandavas when joined with Krishna, they established Indraprastha in that forest area, and that is how that became our Indraprastha became our capital today. And today with my talk, I will support Niraji that we should definitely change the name of Delhi to Indraprastha, because this is the place where the lotus feet of Krishna has traveled. And he is the architect of Indraprastha because he comes with the expertise of establishing Dwaraka. So he helped Pandavas to establish the same manner he established Indraprastha with the help of the Pandavas. Subsequently, like even though we see the Panchalas in the Kuru-Jangala in the Ramayana period, when after the Rama era shifted to Pandava era, you see them in Kambilya and Ahichatra. So that was their final destination. So Kambilya and Ahichatra became the capital of Panchalas, and that is where they continuously in the history they continuously be there during the Mahapadmananda's there's a conquest of the entire Gangatic region. Panchalas were ruling in the Kambilya and Ahichatra. This is basically, I think, maybe not readable also. So migration of the Kurus and Panchalas I have already explained. So these are some summaries about it. And there is a correspondence between Paurava in the Mahabharata and Puru in the Rig Veda. That is basically, both of them are Samvarana basically, the ancestor of Kuru and the Pandavas. And similar kind of conclusions. And the Anava migration. So basically what we call as Asuras. How they went westward first. Just like along with Samvarana, they went westward. But Samvarana got asylum in the Trikshi, that is a western Ikshvaku territory. So he stayed there. And later on, his descendant Kuru came back and returned back to Bharata. Everything is within Bharata because Pakistan is part of the Bharata. So everything happened within that the greater Indian subcontinent, right? So nobody went outside. So he reached up to Sindhu and returned back. But some Anavas continued moving westwards. And these Anavas are the ones who went to Afghanistan and Iran, and they became the Zoroastrians. So they have a memory of everything. They have memory of Varaprithviya as Varena, four-cornered region they know. And they returned in the Vendida, this was their ancient homeland. Varena was their ancient homeland. They were ruling that. And in the Puranas, we know that Asuras have conquered Devaloka. So they are matching. And then there is another place they have mentioned is Aryanam Veja, which is Airavata, for example. It can be corresponded to Airavata or Aryavraja or something like that. So this is, even irrespective of the name, it mentioned it was very cold in that region. 10 months of winter and 2 months of summer. So definitely you can connect with the Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. So as per Srikant Talagiri, Anavas were originally in the Kashmir region, and there is some kind of truth in that, because the Aryan Veja, the oldest homeland of Anavas, they were mentioned as living in a place where there is 10 months of winter and 2 months of summer. So there is Aryanam Veja. They mentioned about Saraswati as Harahvaiti. They mentioned Sarayu as Harayu. And then they have a term for Afghanistan, the land of horses, something like that. Vaikirata, something like that. So they mentioned Marubhumi as Mauru in their the text in Vendida. So many places in India, like including Haryana and Kashmir, Saraswati and Sarayu is mentioned in the Avestan text. So they came from India, went to Afghanistan, and then finally went to Iran. And similarly, the eastward Ikshwaku migration, so I will skip that. It is a bigger topic where I have, I will finally tell the fruit. The fruit is very positive. That Sri Rama is really in Ayodhya itself. So we can put to rest so many researchers who say Sri Rama was in Iraq, Sri Rama was in Iran, or in Indus Valley. All these things are wrong, but I got a clear migration of Sri Rama's ancestors, Sagara, moving towards Sagara was in Saraswati, and Sagara's grandson Amshumat moved to Yamuna. Of course, again another Yamuna connection. So Yamuna was renamed as Amshumati in memory of Amshuman. And Amshuman's grandson Bhagirath moved to Ganga and gave the name Bhagirathi to Ganga. And Bhagirath's descendants, that is Kakusta, Raghu, and moved further eastwards. Finally, Aja and Dasharatha and Rama settled on Sarayu and established Ayodhya there. And Ayodhya, we can consider in archaeology, it is a younger city which is corresponding to whatever I am mentioning. But ultimately, the best part for Indians, all of us who really respect and love Sri Rama, that we have a proof, from literary proof, that Ayodhya is exactly in the Ayodhya where in Uttar Pradesh.